Crash! Gerald Burns' emergency pod slammed into Zorgax's fungal forest floor. His head banged viciously against the harness straps, blood oozing from a gash. He groaned as pain shot through battered ribs and fractured bones. "Helga, run environment scan!" Gerald groaned before his voice trailed off. No reply came. The AI assistant was offline, likely damaged from impact. His ship had been caught in Zorgax's gravity well and smashed apart in the atmosphere. Gerald was utterly alone on an alien world. Mustering his strength, Gerald hit the release on his harness and crawled out of the wreckage. Strange bioluminescent mushrooms glowed around the crash site. A tall amphibious creature with shimmering pale blue skin stood at the edge of the clearing, staring at Gerald curiously. He blinked dazedly, wondering if it was a hallucination brought on by blood loss. The Wadi, as Gerald would later learn they were called, took a few cautious steps toward him. Gerald tried to speak, but a fresh jolt of pain silenced him as he slumped to the ground. His vision swam and blurred as unconsciousness claimed him. When Gerald awoke, he found himself in a small chamber. The walls were made of some sort of hardened organic resin. Glowing orbs cast soft light and the air felt humid. He was lying on a spongy pallet, with some kind of salve smeared over his wounds and crude splints on his broken bones. The Wadi who had found him was tending to the injuries, using unfamiliar tools and medicines. Gerald and Hydrus thought they could breathe easy after thwarting the Wadi invasion plans. But the Wadi military refused to let it go. Enraged that a single human and his Wadi trader companion destroyed their fleet, they launched a planet-wide hunt. Gerald and Hydrus had no choice but to flee into the untamed wilds of Zorgax. They hiked through treacherous swamps, scaled jagged cliffs, and battled venomous creatures, always looking over their shoulders for signs of pursuit. In quiet moments huddled in caves or dense thickets, they swapped stories of Earth and Wadi childhoods. Laughter and shared vulnerabilities forged their bond into something unbreakable. But Commander Xyloth and his soldiers closed in on their trail. Hydrus squeezed Gerald's hand. "We need to split up. I'll collect intel in the cities to clear your name. You find us that cave hideout." Gerald swallowed hard but nodded. Alone, he rigged rockfalls and false trails to throw off the military. He inched along narrow ledges and shimmied up vines, putting hard-earned survival skills to the test. At the rendezvous point, he paced the cavern, stomach in knots. Finally, Hydrus slipped from the shadows and into his arms. "I have proof. The invasion." Thundering boots cut her off. Xyloth stormed in, plasma rifle leveled at them, a dozen soldiers at his back. "Surrender, human?" Gerald and Hydrus pressed together, evaluating the squad. He quirked an eyebrow at her. "Remember that scissor takedown?" In a blur, they whirled into practiced attack combos, disarming some soldiers, using their armored bodies as shields against others. Xyloth roared in outrage as they decimated his men. A stray plasma blast struck a metal door, exposing a hidden chamber. Towering mainframes blinked and hummed. Diagrams of human fighter ships covered the walls alongside anatomical drawings. "A research lab on us?" Gerald gaped. Hydrus pulled up schematics on an alien terminal, her face darkening. "This is what drove the invasion, wanting to understand humanity. Gerald, they want an alliance, not a war." "Then let's give them one." He forced Xyloth to his knees. "Here's the deal. We'll come peacefully, stand trial, and negotiate peace between humans and Wadi." As soldiers snapped restraints on them, Gerald met Hydrus's eyes, seeing his own blend of trepidation and hope. Whatever twists lay ahead, they'd face them side by side. Two worlds, one team. Gerald and Hydrus stood before the Wadi High Council, their hearts pounding in their chests. The grand chamber echoed with murmurs and whispers as they presented their evidence. Recordings from the secret research facility, documents detailing the true motives behind the invasion plans. Gerald's voice rang out, unwavering. "Counselors, the path to Earth was paved with a desire for knowledge, for cooperation. But those pure intentions were twisted by extremists, by those who seek war instead of peace. Hydra stepped forward, her shimmering skin catching the light. Gerald and I, we're proof that our kinds can coexist, that we can learn from each other, grow together. Our bond was forged through hardship, through respect for one another's ways. Let us be an example, a beacon of hope. At first, the council members grumbled, their eyes narrow with skepticism. But as Gerald and Hydrus continued, as they spoke of their trials and revelations, the tide began to turn. One by one, the counselors nodded, their expressions softening. Just as a glimmer of understanding dawned, the chamber doors burst open. Commander Xyloth stormed in, flanked by heavily armed loyalists. "Seize them!" he bellowed, jabbing a finger at Gerald and Hydrus. "These collaborators seek to undermine our righteous conquest!" Chaos erupted. Plasma blasts sizzled through the air as Xyloth's forces clashed with loyal guards. Council members dove for cover, shouting in confusion and fear. In the midst of the firefight, Gerald grabbed Hydrus's hand and pulled her close. "We need to go, now!" They fled, ducking and weaving through the crossfire. Alarms blared as they raced through the winding corridors of the council's citadel. Gerald's heart hammered against his ribs, adrenaline surging through his veins as they burst out into the city streets. "The underwater districts," Hydrus panted, pointing toward the shimmering canals that snaked between the towering buildings. "We can lose them in the labyrinth." They plunged into the cool waters, kicking deeper into the submerged maze. Schools of bioluminescent fish scattered as they swam past, their glow casting eerie shadows on the coral-encrusted walls. Gerald's lungs burned, but he pushed on, following Hydrus through the winding tunnels. As they surfaced in a hidden grotto, gasping for air, they found themselves surrounded by a group of Wadi citizens. Their eyes were filled not with hostility, but with curiosity and a glimmer of hope. "You're the human and the traitor," one of them said, his voice soft. "The ones who speak of peace." Gerald and Hydrus shared a glance, realization dawning. These were the people they'd been fighting for all along, the ones who yearned for an end to the conflict, for a chance at a better future. "We need your help," Gerald said, his voice raw with emotion. "Xyloth is leading your people down a path of destruction. We have to stop him, to show everyone the truth." The Wadi rebels nodded, their commitment mirroring Gerald and Hydrus. Together, they hatched a desperate plan to infiltrate Xyloth's command center, to hijack the communications grid and broadcast their message of peace to the entire planet. The assault was brutal, a nerve-shredding gauntlet of close-quarters combat and narrow escapes. Gerald and Hydrus fought side by side, their movements fluid and synchronized as they cut through Xyloth's elite guards. But even as they seized control of the command hub, victory came at a steep price. Gerald slumped against a console, his hands slick with his own blood. His vision blurred, the edges darkening as he struggled to stay conscious. Hydrus knelt beside him, her eyes brimming with tears as she cradled his head in her lap. "You have to go," Gerald rasped, his voice barely a whisper. "Finish what we started. The future of our worlds. It's in your hands now." Hydrus nodded, her fists tight with purpose. She leaned down, pressing her forehead against his in a gesture of profound connection. Then, with a final squeeze of his hand, she turned to the communication array. As Hydrus's words poured out across the airwaves, a clarion call for unity and understanding, Gerald felt a swell of pride and love. Even as his consciousness faded, he knew that their fight, their sacrifice, hadn't been in vain. The stage was set for a final confrontation, a battle that would decide the fate of two civilizations. And though Gerald's part in the story was nearing its end, he knew that Hydrus would carry the torch, leading the charge for a brighter tomorrow. Hydrus' words echoed across Zorgax, igniting a spark of rebellion that spread like wildfire. Citizens poured into the streets, their voices rising in a thunderous chorus demanding Xyloth's removal and peace with Earth. "No more lies," they chanted, waving makeshift signs. "Negotiations, not war." But Xyloth refused to relinquish power. His loyalist troops stormed the cities, plasma rifles blazing. Civilians scattered as armored transports rolled through marketplaces, crushing fruit stands and vendor carts. In the capital, a young Wadi mother clutched her child as soldiers advanced. "Please, we're unarmed!" she cried. The troops opened fire anyway, their energy blasts scorching the air. Meanwhile, Gerald lay strapped to a cold metal table in a secret compound. Blood trickled from his nose as Xyloth's chief interrogator loomed over him. "Tell us the Resistance's plans," the interrogator hissed, brandishing a neural probe. Gerald spat blood. "Go to hell." The probe seared into his flesh, but Gerald's mind remained his own. He focused on Hydrus, on their shared dream of peace, letting it fuel his commitment. Elsewhere, Hydrus moved like a shadow through Zorgax's undercity. She met with disgraced politicians and disillusioned military officers in abandoned warehouses and seedy bars. "Xyloth betrayed us all," Hydrus told them. "Help me stop him before it's too late." One by one they nodded, pledging their support to the growing rebellion. Rebel strike teams hit Xyloth's outposts under cover of darkness. They freed prisoners from work camps and raided armories, arming themselves for the battles to come. In his cell, Gerald heard distant explosions. Alarms blared as rebel forces stormed the compound. A stray blast hit the door controls, and Gerald seized his chance. He stumbled out, ducking energy bolts as he ran. "This way!" A rebel fighter grabbed his arm, leading him to an escape shuttle. Across the planet, Hydrus received word of Gerald's rescue. Hope surged within her as she prepared to be reunited with her human companion once more. Their eyes met as Gerald's shuttle touched down at the rebel base. No words were needed. Their bond transcended species and spoke volumes. Together again, they knew the real fight was just beginning. Gerald stood at the podium, his voice carrying across the grand assembly hall on Zorgax. Wadi dignitaries and human officials filled the seats, their eyes fixed on the lone human figure. "Today marks a new chapter in the history of our worlds," Gerald proclaimed, his hands gripping the edges of the lectern. "The Wadi-Human Alliance Treaty isn't just a document. It's a promise, a commitment to shared prosperity and understanding." As applause erupted, Gerald's smile didn't quite reach his eyes. He nodded to the crowd, but his mind drifted to Hydrus. Her absence left a hollowness in his chest that no amount of acclaim could fill. Later, in his quarters, Gerald slumped into a chair. Holograms flickered around him, trade agreements, cultural exchange proposals, and scientific collaboration plans. He rubbed his temples, pushing aside a pang of grief. "Computer, pull up the file on the Zarathian mineral rights negotiation," he muttered. As Gerald immersed himself in work, his communicator chirped. Earth's president appeared on the screen. "Outstanding job on the treaty, Ambassador," she beamed. "You've done more for interstellar relations in months than we managed in decades." Gerald nodded, forcing a smile. "Thank you, Madam President. It's an honor to serve." The conversation continued, but Gerald's attention drifted to a framed photo on his desk. Him and Hydrus, laughing together in happier times. Days blurred into weeks as Gerald shuttled between Earth and Zorgax. He threw himself into his duties, filling every waking moment with meetings, negotiations, and policy drafting. On one such trip to Zorgax, Gerald found himself drawn to the ruins of Xyloth's command bunker. Ducking under a fallen support beam, he maneuvered through the debris-strewn corridors. A faint glow caught his eye. Pushing aside a twisted piece of metal, Gerald uncovered a hidden console. His fingers flew over the alien interface, decrypting layer after layer of security protocols. Suddenly, the screen flared to life. Gerald's breath caught in his throat as he read the message. "My dearest Gerald, if you're reading this, I've succeeded. I've found a way to cheat death itself. Follow these instructions, and we can be together again." Gerald's hands trembled as he downloaded the data cache. His mind raced with possibilities and doubts. Could he really bring Hydrus back? And at what cost to the fragile peace he'd worked so hard to build? As he stumbled out of the bunker, Gerald knew his life would never be the same. The choice before him would shape not just his future, but the future of two worlds. With a deep breath, he made his decision, and set out to find the one person who could help him, a renegade Wadi scientist rumored to push the boundaries of what was possible. The hunt for Hydrus had begun.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.